I'm Chris Oppenheim. People call me Church. I'm the owner of Interstate Inc. in Los Angeles, California. We cater almost exclusively to recovering addicts, and we have a program in place to help artists with addiction issues get their lives and careers back on track. We're trying to raise awareness, educate others, and reduce the negative stigmas associated with addiction. We want everyone to know there is hope, we do recover, and most importantly, even broken crayons still color. Welcome to today's episode of the Broken Crayons podcast here at Interstate Inc. Today we'll be talking to the police, but this time I'll be asking the questions. And without further ado, this is my friend Ken, who has graciously accepted my request to tell his story. Ken.
Church.
I made a joke about in the intro about talking to the police today, but that is actually your old life, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So, you care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was in law enforcement for 12 years. Worked multiple assignments, and then lost my career.
How and why?
Oh, man. So, in losing my career...
Well, first of all, didn't you work in like all different like SWAT and
Yes. Yeah.
What all did you do as an officer?
As a police officer, I worked started off in patrol, where everybody pretty much starts at, and transitioned into the detective bureau as a crimes against persons detective, and stayed in that position for a couple of years, investigating all crimes against people, homicide, assaults, things like that. And from there, I transitioned out into major narcotics and worked major narcotics for a year, and then promoted back into patrol as the watch commander. Maintained that position for a few years.
Your military background?
Yeah. Joined the Army in 1983, and including active duty and reserve time. I got out in 90, well involved in my law enforcement career at that time. But yeah, I had a prior military background, infantry.
Alexa, stop. Edit that out.
Nope, I'm leaving it.
So, when did you get out of the Army?
1990.
1990. Well, I guess so. The whole point of this is that, you got a pretty bizarre story to tell, man. There's not a lot of addicts that I meet that started off in law enforcement.
Yeah.
So, when did everything change? Did you use when you were cop?
No, I didn't use while I was a cop, but I have a history of substance abuse going back into childhood. My family has just an extensive addiction history, alcoholism, drug addiction. My first drug was alcohol at 10 years old, when I would steal my grandfather's White Lightning and would mark the bottle and fill it back up with water, just so...
You were a typical kid.
Yeah. And it progressed, and it progressed pretty rapidly. Started smoking pot, and then got into a lot harder drugs.
What makes you go from that extreme to police officer? Help me understand that one.
I've always had the desire to help people, and
Thought that's what you'd be doing.
Either that or a firefighter. I felt that was my calling, and I had a lot of tragedy as a kid. I had a 5-year-old cousin get hit and killed by a car in front of us, and And I remember back then going, wow, I really want to help, you know, and just didn't know. And then I watched my aunt just fall into addiction and eventually overdose and die. Um, and she left four other four other kids with my uncle. Um, and a couple years later, my mom overdosed and died. And by that point, I was kind of messed up. The family life was really messed up as a kid. My dad would come in and out of the picture consistently. My mom didn't know how to raise me by herself, so she would dump me off on my grandparents. And my grandparents were raging alcoholics, typical Irish. And, I just kind of would run the streets. And got really strung out by the time I was 15. And yeah, I was pretty strung out. And by the time I hit 18, I knew I didn't want to live this life, but I didn't know anything different.
Military.
Yeah, exactly.
The way out.
I was like, well, if I can get out of here,
I considered it. They wouldn't take me for psychiatric reasons.
And so I did. I joined the Army, and and I joined infantry, 11 Bravo, and it was a good fit. I grew up in East LA area, a lot of violence, and it was a natural path. And when I was getting out of active duty, I was like, well, I'm not clean, but I'm not using drugs. I haven't used drugs in a couple of years, and everything was going pretty well. And so I applied for police department and got hired, went to the academy, and started my career in law enforcement. And I lied during my background, and because they asked, did you ever use any hard drugs? Or,
No.
Nope. Smoked pot a couple times. But I did really well in law enforcement because it's a very violent career. And what I know now that I didn't know then was my addiction manifested into violence. And
instead of substances. Gotcha.
And it was acceptable. It was expected. Yeah. There's an old saying, one deputy, one riot, and
which means what exactly?
Which means you are expected to handle shit. Don't show any weakness. If you got 50 people out there fighting and you're the only one, you better take care of it.
Wow.
And
sounds like a legal gang.
Well, I've always said that law enforcement is the biggest gang in the world,
So do us criminals.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where you don't show weakness, you don't show anything other than being stoic. I remember my first year in law enforcement, and I got to know this family, and I was still in training, and it was a Latino family. Dad worked in the fields, and he would come home after working all day, drink, and then start beating the shit out of the family. So we started stopping by the house.
Check on them and shit.
Check on them before anything happened. And we got to know these people. And one night.
Proactive, so to speak.
Yeah, it was, and that was different and that was different for back then. That was the 80s, and that was really not heard of and not done like it is now. But one night I was working, and I'm pulling up to the back of the station, and the radio went off with emergency tones. All units be advised, man with the gunshots fired. I'm thinking, oh yeah, hot call, here we go. And then they put out the address, and my heart just sunk. And I was the first unit on the scene, and I get out of my unit, and I see a body laying in the front yard, and it has a shotgun draped across the legs. So I'm making my way up. Backup units are getting there, and get up to the body, and I grab the shotgun while my backup guys are turning on their flashlights. And it was the dad, and he was laying there, and half of his head was gone. And I was like, all right, that's cool. It was dad, And I'm walking over to my unit to secure the shotgun. And the mom comes jumping over this 3-foot retaining wall, screaming at me, Kenny, go in there and get my daughter. Go in there and get my daughter. And as she's screaming this at me, I'm listening to my radio as the other units are putting out, we have another dead body. And so she had 2 twin boys and 1 little girl. And so I'm asking, I'm like, where are the boys? Where are the boys? And she goes, I got the boys out. Can you go get my daughter? So I put her in my unit, told her to sit here and wait for me. I went over to the house, and as I'm walking through the front door, I noticed teeth all over the ground. And I'm looking at it, and I look over, and the little girl slept on a hide-a-bed in the front room. And the dad had gone in and stuck the shotgun in her mouth and fired while she was sleeping. And her head was all over the wall. And that fucked me up, man.
I bet it did.
It
Jesus
fucked me
Christ.
up for years. But, you have to deal with that. And you can't show weakness. You can't show, that shit bothered you. I had nightmares for years of her. And it just really emphasized.
Yeah, I got a fucked up, uneasy feeling just hearing it.
Yeah, it was fucked up, man. And it just emphasized more violence for me, and just watching what people do to each other. And I became a very violent officer. And to end my career, the coup de grace, I was working as the watch commander, and it was around 9 o'clock at night. We got a baby not breathing call, which we rolled on. And so we get out to the scene, and we start doing CPR on this 6-week-old baby. And fire rescue gets there. We jump start the baby, started breathing again. We called in for an airship to flight the baby over to Loma Linda, which is a children's hospital. And as soon as the baby gets there, the doctors call us and say, you need to get somebody over here now. So I called the on-call detective, who happened to be my partner in SWAT. Told him, you need to get over there. Something's going on. And as soon as he gets there, he calls me up and says, go hook mom and dad up. I'll be back.
Hook them up, meaning?
Take them into custody.
Gotcha.
So my guys and I would go over, we'd grab mom and dad, bring them back, put them in separate cells, waiting. And when my partner got back, he had told me that the doctors had found 22 fractures and the baby had been sexually assaulted.
Jesus Christ.
And I had just come out of the detective bureau. And so he said, hey man, I don't want to do this interview on my own. I want you to come in with me. And I was like, all right. Like
the interrogation?
Yeah. And So you get in there, and I know this guy from prior contacts, and he's a dipshit, you know, and
To say the least.
to say the least. And he starts lipping off, and I snapped, man, and I started fucking this dude up, you know.
He's the one that did that shit to the baby, though, right?
He is the one that did it to the baby, you know, and he just kept flipping off, and I kept hurting him, and kind of the bottom line is I tortured the guy for about 8 hours, you know, and I gave him, you know, in my head, I was thinking, well, I'm going to apply the pain that this guy applied to the baby, and I'm going to hurt this guy.
I don't think there's a lot of people who disagree with you.
And
homeboy got what he deserved.
And I did. I hurt him, you know, and unfortunately another officer had heard the whole thing, and he did not like me, and he reported it to the chief. And the next day I was pulled in, and my badge and gun were taken, and I was suspended. And I knew at that point my career was over, you know, to the extent I wasn't sure yet, but I knew that this was the end. And they launched an investigation and terminated us, both me and the other detective. And we were eventually prosecuted.
You went to prison for that one, didn't you?
I did. I ended up in federal prison.
Before you go any further, I think you deserved a medal, but I understand. You know what I mean? At the same time, like, it's like understandable, you know? Anyway.
You know, I had kids. Oh, no. I had kids, and I thought of my kids while I was beating on this guy. I was like, I'll end you, dude. I'll end you. And, you know, in hindsight, what I did was wrong, but I was in full-blown addiction to violence, you know, and unfortunately, I think I had a God complex that I could do no wrong, and
your job to instill karma kind of thing? It
was my job to hurt the people that hurt people. And, you know, we were tried in state court, and we beat it in state court through a technicality, and then the feds picked it up. And when the feds picked it up, I knew there was no beating the feds. The feds have a 96% conviction rate. And the first offer that they gave us was 40 years. And I was like, oh, we'll take it to the box, you know.
Yeah, it's not exactly a bargain.
Not really, no.
40 years for fucking up a pedophile.
Yeah.
Right.
And
seems like backwards justice, but all right.
The next offer is 25. And I was like, take it to the box. And then the next offer came in was 15. And then the final offer that came in was 5. And they said, take the 5, or we guarantee you'll do 10. They had us on conspiracy. And they said, you'll get a mandatory minimum on the conspiracy. So I was like, all right, I'll take the 5. You know? And I remember sitting in court in downtown LA in federal court, the judge telling me that it will never come out in open court why he was in your custody. And
really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because they knew that there'd be public sympathy over it. So the judge flat out said, it's never going to come out why he was in your custody, only that he was in your custody and you did these things.
That doesn't even make sense. It's like the judge being sympathetic towards a pedophile.
Oh, he was. You know. And so I took the deal. You know, I was like, okay, I'll take the deal.
Cop in federal prison.
Yep. You know, and right when they suspended me, man, I immediately went back to using. You know,
I bet.
I went to the doctor and got prescribed a bunch of opiates and benzos and muscle relaxers, which I took all together, and I got strung out really quick. And the addiction was back just overnight. You know, the drug addiction.
Doesn't take long.
And
first one will get you there.
It was on. Yeah, it was on and tracking. And you know, I used all the way up until I went to prison. As far as the opiates, and I was scoring them from the doctor, you know, and the doctor was sympathetic, but he goes, "Hey man, you're not going to get these in prison, so I'm cutting you off." And I was like, "That's fine." And I went over to a dude that I had arrested and said, "Bro, I'm going to prison. I need you to hook me up." And he goes, "Yeah, I've been watching it on the news, man. I've been watching it." And he goes, "Here you go, dude." And so I continued scoring from him until I actually went to prison and got in, turned myself in, which was the hardest thing in the world to do. But I turned myself into the federal marshals, and I was gouged out and pounding on their door. And they open the door, and the marshal looks at me and goes, "Motherfucker." "Yep, this is how I'm coming in."
Tore up from the floor up.
And they processed me through and immediately sent me to the hole, you know. So for my protection, I'm sure, you know. And so
But you ended up right on the main yard anyway, right?
I did, yeah. So I caught the chain over to March Air Force Base, where I caught Con Air, and they flew me over to Oklahoma City with Federal Transfer Center. And kind of cool because the Sally Port, man, is you get off the plane and you're in the prison. You don't even hit the tarmac. And so I'm in there and I'm processing through, and they pulled me in for processing. And BOP goes, "Well, you want to PC up?" And I was like, "Nope, send me to mainline." And he goes, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yep, send me to mainline." And, you know, I was already convinced I was dead, you know. And they said, "All right, get the fuck out of here." And so I went back, you know, into General Pop. And, you know, I've often thought of this, of my higher power fucking carrying me through that shit, because I spent 2 weeks in Oklahoma City and caught the chain down into Texas, where I ended up doing 21 of 24 months. And my first day on the yard, my own people walk up to me and say, "Here's your coffee and here's your cigarettes." And all I know about prison is don't take anything from anybody, you know, and that's it. And they start arguing with me. And I'm like, "Dude, I don't want your coffee. I don't want your cigarettes. I'm good. You know, my money hit the books in a couple days." And they're getting a little upset. And so I go, "Well, I better take this, you know." Stop making waves. And, you know, and then a couple days later, my money hit the books and I paid them back. And the funny thing about it, man, nobody ever asked me for my J's and C's, which is the judgment and commitments, the reason why you're there, you know. And it never really came up, maybe because I was still strung out.
Which is commonly requested.
Yeah, I mean, really the strange thing about it is for the next 2 years, I watched every Thursday, and nobody got what I got. You know, everybody got asked for their J's and C's, and that was my higher power, man. It really was. And
something to be said about, I don't know, maybe on some level. Like I said, I don't disagree with the way you treated the asshole that did that shit to the baby.
yeah,
So I was like, I don't know.
you know,
Like I said, I understand the laws, but at the same time, like, yeah.
I threw everything away, man. You know, and I wish as a kid I would have known about the program. I really do. I wish I would have known about NA or AA or any of the A's. But my best thinking was join the Army, you know, and it never really resolved all the torment that I had inside.
Right.
I used not to feel.
We all did.
Yeah. And, you know, I spent that 2 years in federal prison, and I was using in there, and I got out on parole, federal parole, and started using again, and caught a new case, and I ended up catching a case for possession and embezzlement and a couple other things, and I'm back in custody again, and I got my PO coming up to me going, I knew you were loaded. I knew you were loaded, but I was hoping that you were going to get clean. And I'm like, yeah, no.
Wishful thinking on your part.
Yeah. Honestly, I felt like I had nothing to live for. You know, I had my kids, and I really love my kids. And
how old were they when that shit happened?
Oh God, they were young, like 10 and 12, something like that. And then my youngest one was a newborn at that time, and it really messed them up. You know, when I was in, they came once for a visit, and that was the worst day in prison, because I watched them come in and I watched them leave, and it really, it just killed me. And I told my ex, don't ever bring them back. I don't want to see anybody while I'm in here. It's so much easier to program without thinking about you guys.
Without a doubt.
You know, and she didn't, thank God, you know. But I caught that new case, and I'm sitting in custody, and my PO's there, and she's telling me how she knew I was loaded, and she was hoping that I would get clean, and she goes, I got something for you. And I'm like, all right, you know, and at this point, I'm in desperation. My grandfather, who
that's what it takes, though,
I loved, you know, he was basically my father. He was dying, and I couldn't get out of custody. They wouldn't release me, and I'm just at that desperation of whatever, you know. I just need to change. I need to start doing the right thing. And she says, I'm gonna get you into treatment. I'm like, okay, what's treatment? Yeah.
Right.
And she goes, you'll find out. And I go, I got the state case hanging over my head, and you know. And she goes, I know. I'm gonna go talk to the judge. And she did. And I ended up getting a 3-year joint suspended from the state as long as I completed treatment. And the feds didn't violate me; they just modified my terms and conditions. And so I ended up in treatment in Pasadena, and I didn't know what to expect. I really didn't. I didn't know. But I knew I was worried about what was going on inside me, you know, and that coming out. And I was so resistant initially. And they're asking me to share in group, and I'm telling them, fuck you, fuck this place, send me back to the joint. I know what I got to do there. And I had a counselor that says, oh no, you know how to do that. You don't know how to do this thing called life. Now share.
Exactly.
And I was like, whoa. And it really messed me up. I was like, wow, this dude's right, you know?
People don't realize that that something so uncomfortable like a prison cell could ultimately become more comfortable than
Yeah.
life itself, like,
Yeah.
because the insides are all fucked up.
And they were, man. They were really messed up. I've been
You've
holding
seen some
on.
shit though, like, fuck, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you're while you were telling that story, your body language changes.
Yeah.
I can see it in your face that it's almost like you can still go back there. And I can't imagine having, that constantly repeat.
Yeah. And I have PTSD from it. Not just that, but my mom dying, my aunt dying, my cousin dying, and then seeing that shit that I saw in law enforcement. I've seen a lot of really gnarly stuff. I've had people die on me. I've had people, just I've been in a shooting. I've shot somebody, and just all the things that you go through in that career, um, they take a toll.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's actually pretty common for police officers to end up drinking.
Oh, yeah.
Alcoholism. Is that common?
Alcoholism is huge in law enforcement. I really didn't drink when I was in law enforcement because I was getting my fix through violence. And it activated the same neurotransmitters that drugs did. But I had some friends in law enforcement that were full blown alcoholics. And so getting back to treatment, I ended up in treatment, and it's a big place. There's 120 people there, and
it's been a long time. Is the place still around?
Yeah, still very prominent. And I ended up.
You've been clean how long?
21 years now. Yeah, and in treatment, I end up hooking up with this guy who asked me, what area I'm from, and I'm like, I am from the Inland Empire, and he goes, oh yeah, I ran around out there, so and so and so and so, and I was like, yeah, I know that motherfucker. I arrested him, but I'm hiding my identity because that's what I did. Right. I hid it in prison, and I don't know what this treatment shit's about, so I'm still hiding my identity.
You're still in New York.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, so and so and so and so, and I was like, yeah, I know them, and then I throw out a few names, say, so and so and so and so, and he's like, yeah, and so we're hanging out, and we're doing this. We're start doing this thing called recovery together, And about 6 months in, man, I had done I was in the middle of my first 4-step, man, and that honesty thing started hitting, and I go up to him, I go, and I think it was a test, really, at this point. Does recovery really work? And I go to him, I say, hey, bro, when we first were hanging out and we were talking to each other about, so-and-so and so-and-so. And he goes, yeah, I remember that. And I go, well, that's because I was a cop, man, and I arrested him. and this dude was a hardcore criminal, man.
You talking about Bruno?
Bruno, yeah. and
didn't Bruno?
Yeah, I'm getting to that. Yeah. And he goes, no, man, and I pull out a picture that I have of myself in uniform, and I showed it to him. And he's looking at it, and he's looking at me.
Oh, shit.
And I'm like, all right, it's either on, or whatever. And he looks at me and he goes, hey, Ben, I don't care about that shit. I love you, brother. And I knew at that point recovery really worked. And the funny thing about Bruno is Bruno shoots cops.
Right.
And he shot one
gangster.
of the guys I worked with. And, that was back in the 90s. And, and he goes, hey, do you remember Deputy so-and-so? And I was like, yeah. He goes, remember when he got shot? And I was like, yeah. He goes, yeah, I did that.
Jesus Christ.
And I go, all right, I still love you anyways, bro. And, you know, and we've done this journey in recovery, man, for 21 years together, you know, and
He caught time for that.
he caught a 10 to life on that one. And, you know, and he asked me one day, he's like, what would you guys have done if you would have caught me there? I told him, I said, dude, we would have killed you. He goes, yeah, that's what I thought.
He's gonna do the same thing you're doing right now. Come tell his story.
That's awesome.
So it's cool because these two separate podcasts kind of go together. You know, to hear the other side of that. You know.
Yeah.
Because to meet either one of you, there'd be no way of knowing that there was a past like that.
Yeah.
It's like,
no.
Unless you're told, you know. And when Michael hooked me up with you to do this cover up on your forearm, the original part of this sleeve.
Yeah.
He kind of told me that story, and I was like, what the fuck, you know? Well, yeah, he fucking beat this pedophile half to death, and then he went to prison, and I was like, holy shit. You know, and it's like, stuff like that, like some of the stories that I've heard out here, like I'm almost ashamed that I was running from the things I was running from. They're so minute in comparison to some of the shit that is fucking, holy fuck, dude. You know, it's crazy. It really is.
It is. And, you know, only in recovery will you see this, you know? And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, man. Like, I definitely came into this thing much more open-minded this time around. You know, like my first meeting, I was like 19-year-old bankrupt drug dealer, you know, but I this is the best I've ever done, and my clean time starts at the age of 40.
Yeah,
you know, so I was, like I said, introduced to it in and out, and I don't know, I was the guy who would memorize a bunch of literature and the cliches and spit that shit and not even understand what any of it fucking meant, you know?
Yeah.
That's why this time around I have actually never voluntarily shared at a meeting. You've heard me at the microphone. It's because I was asked to say something, you know, and I did that for a reason. I didn't want to, I knew I needed to shut the fuck up and listen this time, you know?
You know, that's one thing that was told to us, both Bruno and myself. You know, at the beginning, it was shut the fuck up. You have nothing to offer. Just listen.
People don't talk like that at meetings anymore, and they really should, because the newcomers don't understand just like.
Yeah. And, you know,
you gotta listen. You gotta pay attention.
The funny thing about Bruno and I too is we both had the same sponsor twice. You know, we both had two pretty hardcore guys in recovery. That sponsored both of us at the same time, and so we're from the same mold, you know, as far as our journey in recovery and our sponsorship, and you know what,
still in the same sponsor family.
No, not currently. When Mike passed away,
he's technically my grand sponsor.
Yeah,
not technically, but he is.
Yeah.
And that was a sight to see when I came out here, man. Like, one of the first things I did is I got Ray to sponsor me, and Bruno's his sponsor.
Yep.
And they said, hey, we have a sponsorship family meeting, and I'm like, okay, whatever the hell that is, you know. And it's like 60 fucking guys.
Yeah.
In that one family.
Yeah.
You know. And it's cool because Bruno doesn't sit at the head of the table like John Gotti or something.
Right.
He's just one of the guys. He just
one of the guys
happens to have done it first and passed it down. You know.
Yeah.
He's humble.
Bruno's very humble. You know, coming from where Bruno comes from, man, you're just like, unless you know it, you don't know it.
Yeah.
You know?
Just kind of happy-go-lucky dude.
Yeah.
Who shoots cops.
Who shoots cops. Not just once.
Right.
He's had multiple shootouts with the cops. You know?
So at this point, you're a clinical director of a fucking IOP.
I am. You know, one of the things when we got clean, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't. You know, I knew that I was getting better. And Bruno and I went back to school together.
Just being a cop wasn't an option, huh?
No, not anymore. The judge actually said that in open court. You will never be in law enforcement again, ever.
Like, it's
like,
cool, dude.
whatever.
I didn't want to do it again any fucking way.
And we went and got our substance abuse certifications, you know, and our sponsor told us if we're going to stay in this business, then we need to be educated. You know, and I wasn't educated as a cop, man. I had a GED. And so went to school, and I just kept going, and I kept going, and I eventually got a bachelor's degree, and I kept going, and I went to grad school, and I got a master's degree, and then I got licensed as a therapist, and I had to jump through a ton of hoops with the Board of Behavioral Sciences just to get that license, man, because I'm a convicted felon. And but I got it. And
which is awesome, because who better to help than the other convicted felons than the convicted felon?
yeah. And you know, I've worked for the county of San Diego, I've worked for the county of San Bernardino as a clinician. I went to Kaiser Permanente as a clinician, and then became a manager, and I managed 3 of their clinics. And then Michael had this vision for opening up this outpatient and
a tattoo shop.
And a tattoo shop at the same time. And, you know, he asked me to come on, and, you know, and I took a leap of faith and jumped out there, and because what we do, helping the addict out of the addiction, man, that's the best thing in the world.
It's fucking nuts, dude.
And, you know, and we're doing it, and we're doing it well. You know, we're
yeah. I mean, I think it's important to touch on the fact that there's a lot of corruption in this in that business, and
yeah,
you know, when you find one that's on the up and up, it's almost rare. Yeah, which is fucking sad.
Yeah,
because there's a shit ton of treatment centers in Southern California, and for it to be rare to find a decent one,
yeah,
it's fucked up.
And that's sad.
People
man,
just taking advantage of the addicts.
You know, you look at that fentanyl outbreak. We're having a pandemic of fentanyl, and people are dying every day behind these overdoses. And
yeah, the younger kids, they just don't understand it.
They don't get it. You know, and they think they're invincible.
It's straight up Russian roulette
every time. And you know, I have a cousin right now that's on life support. Been on life support for 4 years behind his addiction. He came to Impact with us, and he had 5 years while we were working at Impact. And this one day he says, "Man, I'm going back out. I've had enough," and went back out.
Conscious decision.
Yeah, and you know, and we grew up together, man. We were like brothers, and I couldn't convince him otherwise. And he went back out, and he stayed out. And 4 years ago, I got a call in the middle of the night, man. He's in the emergency room. He overdosed. We don't know if he's going to make it. And this is the same kid that his mom overdosed and died. Is, you know, my mom's sister. And so I shoot over to the emergency room, and they've got him on ventilators. They're working him, and he never came out of it. And he's been on a ventilator, and he's been on a feeding tube since. And it fucking destroyed me, as far as he knew there was a better way, and he chose to go out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's how strong addiction is.
Yep. Yeah. It's part of the reason I shut the fuck up and listen, because I was always the guy that would just run right back out. But I think we're about time to take a break on this tattoo, and we're about out of time for the podcast itself.
Thanks for inviting me, church.
Thanks for telling that story, dude. Holy shit. If that one doesn't make an impact, nothing will.
Yeah. It's just my story, man.
And it's a fucking crazy one. Oh, cool. Let's take a second. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Broken Crayons podcast here at Interstate Inc. I want to thank Ken for coming out. Most importantly, like, share, help spread the word so these voices can be heard. Peace.